Dobrodošli na današnjem pogovoru z avtorjem Pomone, igre, ki jo premierno predstavljamo jutri, ravno na tem odru, na tej scenografiji in v režiji Jaše Kocelija. Jaz sem Eva Kraševec, sem dramaturginja uprizoritve, katere gledališki list imamo v naročju. Poleg mene je Alistair McDowall in njegova prevajalka Špela Šinigoj. Lepo pozdravljeni vsi.
Zdravo še.
Glede na to, da Alistairjeve dramatike večina od nas oziroma od vas ne pozna, glede na to, da je premierna uprizoritev šele jutri in smo na nek način tik pred zdajci, pred generalko nocojšnjo, bi jaz v bistvu najprej spregovorila par besed o avtorju in pa seveda o režiserju uprizoritve. Ona da bosta danes glavna govorca, jaz bom poskušala s svojimi dramaturškimi močmi nekako graditi v bistvu tematske mostove med enim in drugim. Za začetek bi rada povedala, da bo pogovor večinoma v angleščini. Alistair bo seveda odgovarjal v angleščini. Lahko ga prevajamo seveda, a bi želeli, da imamo še angleški prevod Alistairjevih odgovorov? Slovenski prevod.
Ni treba povzemati potem.
Dobro. Če bo pa karkoli nejasnega, pa lahko seveda ostavimo in kadarkoli vprašamo. Dobrodošla vsa vprašanja z publike. Skratka, Alistair McDowall, dramatik najmlajše generacije, britanske dramatike, avtor za enkrat, mislim, da 5 objavljenih iger, 4 so tukaj pred nami. In sicer poleg Pomone, ki je zadnja v tej zbirki, so v bistvu pred tem nekako nastale Brilliant Adventures, Talk Show, Captain Amazing in za Pomono še igra, ki jo je napisal po naročilu, igra po naslovu X. O vsebini posameznih iger bomo govorili mogoče majčkeno kasneje, ampak za začetek pa bi mogoče poleg seveda predstavitve režiserja Jaša Kocelija povzela mogoče pač v grobem, o čem gre v Pomoni oziroma s čim smo se ukvarjali. Skratka, na moji desni strani sedi Jaša Koceli, režiser, ki ga verjetno že poznate. Pomona je njegova 9. profesionalna režija v našem prostoru. Poleg dela v gledališču oziroma dramskem gledališču se ukvarja tudi z opernim in baletnim angažmajem. Lansko leto je sodeloval pri baletni predstavi v SNG opera, to so bili Meso srca, Kaktusi. To je ta uprizoritev. In takoj po Pomoni začenja z uprizoritvijo nove slovenske opere, ki jo napisala Svetlana Slapšak in skratka mladi skladatelj Jan Gorjanec, Julka in Janez je naslov. Skratka, Pomona. Pomona, skrivnostna drama o podzemlju družbe, drama kot thriller, drama kot v resnici žanrsko zelo razgibana oziroma mešanica različnih žanrov. In zdaj me samo mogoče pač kot uvodna beseda, da se iz Pomone nekako, da se začnemo v bistvu s Pomono, z vsebino Pomone, bi vprašala Alistairja. Eno vprašanje, o katerem smo že govorili danes na tiskovni konferenci dopoldne, ampak se mi zdi, da glede na strukturo publike lahko to ponovimo. Inspiracija za Pomono oziroma za igro, ki ima na nek način tako kompleksno, ampak hkrati zelo jasno na nek način zasnovo. In pa seveda obenem bi me zanimalo, na kakšen način bi sam opisal vsebino in potek te igre.
Okay. Pomona's a story about a woman looking for her sister, and it's a kind of rabbit hole type story, I guess, in that through searching for her she comes to a city, in this case Manchester, but it's not really about Manchester, that's almost an arbitrary setting, and she finds that all the various clues leading to where her sister is lead to this place called Pomona, where various bad things are happening that you find out at the end of a play. And Pomona's a real place. It's like an island in Manchester, and I was kind of obsessed with it for a long time because I'd go past it on the tram, and it is kind of an island. It's like a strip of land with a canal on either side, and there's train tracks on either side as well, and there's nothing that unusual about it, but it's just that it's kind of very, very close to the city centre, and it's kind of overgrown and kind of post-industrial, like it used to be a dock at one point, and I was interested in it for a while just because it seemed kind of a spooky place. I thought I'd write a ghost story set there or something. I was just kind of interested in it. I thought it was an interesting place, and then so I kind of didn't really think about it that much. It was just a location, and then over a certain amount of time, other ideas and things, which is usually the way if I'm writing a play, cropped up, and gradually they all ended up kind of landing in this place, Pomona. So it did end up being a ghost story, but it's not the supernatural. It's like the people themselves are ghosts, almost sort of haunting the city, you know. And I guess it's a play that's just, it's kind of a collection of everything that scares me, really, particularly about living in, I mean, I live in a city and I work in another city, so I live in Manchester and I work in London, so I spend a lot of my time pinging back and forth between cities, and the play I'd written before this was very rural and isolated, so I was interested in writing something more urban and kind of connected, and yeah, I had this idea for various people kind of orbiting around this central location, that there was something happening, and he was kind of inspired by detective books and film, like Chinatown, I guess would be a big one, and the whole time you're watching Chinatown you're like, why is it called Chinatown? And we only go there at the end, and it becomes not only a location but a kind of broader metaphor for the thing. So I was interested in using that mechanic, which I guess is similar to how, I don't know, Moscow is used in Three Sisters or something, like a location that's not just a place geographically, but is some kind of higher state of mind and metaphorical kind of plane for other things to play out on. And I mean, this is tricky for me because I wrote it quite a long time ago now, so I forget a lot of things, but I know that the thing that kicked the play off, which when you'll see the play, is at the first scene, this isn't really spoiling anything, but the first scene takes place in a car going around a big ring road, like a motorway, all the way around the city, and it's a character who claims that he owns the city, he owns all the real estate in the city, so sort of knows everyone and all the connections and things. And this came because I was driving back very, very late, and I ended up on the M60, and I ended up lost on the M60. It's quite hard to get lost on a ring road because you're just going round. It's, you know, it's not really something you're supposed to be able to do. But I ended up going too far and sort of had to go around it again. And I think to keep me occupied and awake and alert, there was something spooky about being on that road at, I think it was like 3 a.m. or something, because it's like a 5-lane motorway, and when I was on it, there was just no one there, and I could have stopped the car and just gone out and wandered around, and it struck me as being quite a good location to do various devious deeds. And I thought it was interesting to have a character who ran the whole city from his car, just constantly kind of prowling around it like a lion or like some kind of predator or something. And that was the sort of initial image. And then that linked up with Pomona, because Pomona's sort of in the middle of that. So it was almost like that's the kind of the axle that everything else spins around. And then I just sort of filled in the space in between, which was the city. And I don't know, I guess what's interesting for me when I look back at it is, I think the reason it's obviously impossible to tell, but I'm quite an anxious person. And if I look at my plays before Pomona, they all have a character in them who's a bit nervous. The first play in the book has got a character with a speech impediment, and there's a character in Talk Show who's probably the closest I've gotten to accidentally just writing myself, I think, who's quite kind of jittery and nervous and things. And but Pomona and X, the one afterwards, what's interesting to me anyway is that there's not so much an anxious character in the play. It's like the play itself is anxious. Pomona is told in the wrong order, and it kind of jitters from one scene to another, and it doesn't sit still, and it doesn't tell you what's going on all the time. It just lashes from one moment to another, and it's a play that unlocks as you go along, rather than telling you what's going on all the time. You are encouraged to piece it together yourself, because it's a play that whenever anyone's written about this play or talked about this play, they talk about the plot and how it's very plotty and you have to work out, it's like a puzzle you have to work out, and that's fine, but for me that happens almost incidentally, and I think the way you're pulled through the play is through character, in that a lot of the scenes in the play are characters not necessarily talking about the plot or what's going on, they're talking about other things, incidental things or kind of relationship things, and then the plot sort of happens kind of by default, sort of dumps itself into your head. So what happens is, hopefully, is you're watching a play and you're following it character-wise, and you go, okay, I like him and I know who she is, and I'm following that through, but you'll feel under the play this sort of growing sense of dread and unease, and bad things are happening, and then by the time you realise what bad things are happening, it's sort of too late, and you're at Pomona, which of course none of that will make any sense to you because you've not seen or read the play, but when you see it or read it, you'll be like, oh yeah. So that's my slightly indirect answer to that question.
Hvala. Mogoče bi se navezala na vprašanje žanra, in sicer, Jaša, ti si se že veliko ukvarjal z različnimi žanri v gledališču, in me zelo zanima, kako si, recimo, ko si najprej prebral Pomono, razmišljal o žanrskosti, glede na to, da naše gledališče nima poudarka oziroma izjemnega poudarka na tem, ne dajemo glavnega poudarka v bistvu žanrskemu pristopu. Pri Pomoni pa vendarle imamo opravka ne samo z enim žanrom, ampak mogoče s kombinacijo oziroma odzveni različnih žanrov.
Mislim, žanr je zelo uporaben pri razmišljanju o neki atmosferi, o načinu pripovedovanja zgodbe, ampak se mi zdi, da je veliko bolj ga lahko določiti v filmskem mediju, ker lahko popolnoma obvladuješ kader, v katerega gledaš, in luč, medtem ko v gledališču, kjer je ta neprekinjen tok časa, ki se v podobi, ki se razgrine pred tabo, je pa veliko težje zajeti, vse nek učinek, ki ga nek žanr recimo skozi film prinaša. Ampak ja, vseeno mi je zelo fascinantno razmišljati o žanru, tudi nekoč bi rad naredil predstavo, in upam, da bo tudi Pomona vse imela kruške tega, ki bi zares zelo prestrašila ljudi. Ampak jaz mislim, da to je izjemno težko narediti, sploh ne vem, če sem to že videl v življenju, razen v fragmentih. Tako da to je en izziv, ko prebereš Pomono, ja, to puhti ven od žanra, od thrillerja, od hororja, film noir, zelo, detektivka, ampak to ni to glavna stvar, ne. Se mi zdi, da Alistair zelo svobodno, sproščeno uporablja mnoge elemente in jih spaja v tej svoji govorici. In en njegovih glavnih teh impulzov pri ustvarjanju dramatike, kar sem bral, večino prebral vse, kar je povedal v medijih. Sem imel tudi srečo, da sem se srečal z Alistairjem v Londonu v začetku leta, ker sem imel enih 5 vprašanj. Kaj to pomeni iz teksta?
Mogoče je to zdaj dobro izhodišče, ker to podobno vprašanje sem želela postaviti tudi Alistairju. In sicer mislim, da si vidva delita obsesijo s filmi.
Ta otrok interneta, Alistair McDowall kot otrok, samooklicani otrok interneta, fan filma, velik oboževalec filma, obseden bralec razne literature, sploh žanrske. Njega zanima iskanje novih form, če se vrnem preko njega. Ampak ne, da bi nekako na silo iskal formu, se mi zdi, ampak Pomona je res en tak pogumen poskus. Recimo, da prizore je zmešal popolnoma kronološko, injekcije hororja, thrillerja je dal noter, upeljal je mitološko bitje, Cthulhu je, tam ne počiva zadaj za nami na mizici. Upeljal je koncept igre Dungeons and Dragons, ki smo jo fenomenalno danes prevedli v Temnice in zmaji. Potem je te fenomenalne poti likov, loke napisal, atmosfere močne, tako da to je ful enih stvari, in kako zdaj to vse skupaj splesti, pa ta koncept kroženja, ki je, se mi zdi, tudi ključnega pomena, in neka tesnoba, ki je vseobsegajoča, ampak tako zmontirana, da je ves čas vznemirljiva, da nujno rabi ritem, da poganja naprej, tako da ja, neka vznemirljiva tesnova je Pomona, tako bi jaz rekel.
Pomona je v resnici strukturirana kot na nek način kadrirana v bistvu, kot neki prizori, ki bi lahko bili tudi filmski prizori, ampak so izjemno teatralni. In na tem mestu me zelo zanima, Alistair, kako recimo razmišljaš pravzaprav o žanru ti? Namreč že igra, recimo, s katero si prodrl, se pravi Brilliant Adventures, je v bistvu socialna drama, ki ima elemente znanstvene fantastike oziroma nekega elementa v bistvu ustvaritve časovnega stroja, ki potem v bistvu skozi neko socialno tematiko dobi popolnoma drug značaj. Zadnja igra, ki smo jo prebrali, igra X, se dogaja v vesolju, na Plutonovi luni, kjer se zgodi, da posadka zgubi stik z Zemljo in se začnejo odvijati nenavadni dogodki. Se pravi, ponovno nek kontekst medsebojnih odnosov, ki je pa prelit v bistvu z neko drugo žanrsko formo. Kako razmišljaš v bistvu o tej kombinaciji žanrov, ker se mi zdi, da vsaka od iger vsebuje več različnih žanrov?
Yeah, I think I wrote my first play when I was 16, and I started writing plays because I wanted to be Steven Spielberg, but I didn't have any money, so I couldn't buy a camera, but I realised I could use my friends and bully them into making a play with me at lunchtime. And I've said that story in, I think most times I've been asked how I started writing plays and things, and I think people who've not liked my plays have used that as a bit of a stick to beat me with, because they think that I want to write, I'm just writing films but for the stage. But I think that's bullshit, because I think the main reason people that think they're filmic is because they use genre and they have a story. They have like a lot of plots. Quite often they have an antagonist, which are two things that I don't think are exclusive to film in the slightest. Like I've read a lot of books set in space or in the Wild West, or and radio plays and even operas, whatever. And there are definitely certain influences that are filmic of mine, and genres, because we're a species, I guess now, very informed by film, because I guess it's the dominant art form, arguably. It means that there's a certain language that everyone can kind of recognise and go, oh, this is like that, and I've seen a time machine story before, and I've seen it. But I'm interested in creating experiences for live audiences. Like, that's what I'm into. I've been offered a couple of times to turn any of the ones in that book into films, and I've always said I'm not interested, because it'd be like turning a car into a plane. I can't do it. It's something else. It's a thing. It's a play. It's built to be experienced in a room with people, and so the use of genre in that, partly I think that's just unavoidable for me because that's kind of ingrained in me from very young, in that I was into science fiction and horror and latterly westerns and things like that. But also, I think I do drip it in there kind of knowingly, because if you kind of lock into a genre, you can use certain elements to help the audience know where they are, which then you can subvert later, which is kind of exciting to me. So the one that's got the most obvious genre stuff in it is my last one, which I did in London, which is a play called X, which is set on a space station on Pluto. And the play starts and the curtain comes up and what have you, and it's a space station. It looks like the film ones. It's a white box, with a big window and lights and panels and stuff everywhere. But then as soon as you're about 2 minutes into the play, it's like a work play. Or the big influence in that play is like the Cherry Orchard, stuff like that. It's a play where people are sitting, waiting, and they can't go home, and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting. There aren't any laser guns in it or anything, and no one gets kind of sucked out into space and their eyes pop or anything. It's just a bunch of people in a room. And the reason why I thought that was interesting was just it is going to bring in people who wouldn't normally sit and watch the play of a bunch of people sat in a room, and it's going to make the people who have seen every play of people sitting in a room look at it differently and have a different... it's like, it's almost... it's a bit of give and take. But what's weirder to me is that people assign genres to them after you've done them, which I always think like the first play in this book, which is called Brilliant Adventures, has got a time machine in it. But so the first play in this book has got a time machine in it, which meant that everyone thought that the play was science fiction, but the story of the play is it's two brothers who live in a very run-down house on a kind of abandoned housing estate, and it's very rough, and they've got no money and anything. But one of the brothers has invented a time machine. But the time machine is made out of cardboard. It's a cardboard box. It's referenced in the play as looking like a cardboard box, feeling like it is a cardboard box. So there's no science in this apparently science fiction story whatsoever. It's a social drama that happens to have a time machine in it. Now the reason a time machine's in there is because it's a play all about sadness and regret and the past, and kind of carrying around the mistakes that you've made and the circumstances of your life and things like this. If you put a time machine on stage, it makes every single moment and metaphor in that play kind of ache with this kind of regret and, oh my god, there's a time machine and they're still fucked. Like, there's no way out of this situation, And then, so Brilliant Adventures isn't science fiction. That, if it's anything, it's slightly more of a western, because it's an abandoned area and a newcomer comes to town and there's a bit of a kind of fight over this flat. Pomona, which everyone thought was science fiction for reasons I can't explain because it would spoil the entire ending of the play. I was completely surprised that anyone thought there was anything remotely science. They thought it was a dystopia, like 1984 or Brave New World or something. And the thing that I think people made people think it was that, it's hard to talk about without telling you what it is happening all over the world, just in a slightly smaller way. I just turn the dial up a little bit, which is all that fiction does, really. But Pomona does have a lot of horror in it, and there's definitely an influence from like Japanese anime and manga and stuff like that. But then, what is a genre anyway? Talk show's kind of an American family play, which is a genre in itself almost. The big American family play where there's a problem and they all talk it out, and etc. So I never quite. I get asked about it a lot, and I think one problem I have I don't have an issue about it, but the reason why I find it hard to talk about is I don't think I know I'm doing it at the time, and then when I do realise I'm doing it, I do it, and then someone says it's something else. so with Brilliant Adventures, I'm working away, and there's a time machine, and blah 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 blah. And then halfway through that play, I kind of realised, oh, this is a bit like a Western. It's a bit like Rio Bravo or something. Oh, that's interesting. That helps me think about how to boil the tension up in this room, and that helps me think about this character who comes in, and that helps me blah, 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 blah. And then I finish the play, and then everyone says, oh, it's science fiction. And I don't know. Like, so, I mean, usually the worst person to talk about a play is often the person that wrote it, really. Like, I find it hard because I can't explain a lot of this stuff. But the film thing does annoy me because I think it's when people are sniffy about it, because I think it's elitist, because I think it's to do with people going, yeah, you can be influenced by as many Greek dramas as you want, but if you put a reference to a John Carpenter film in there, then you're a hack, you know. And I don't like that, because I think it's stopping bringing people in. And my favourite artists have always been ones who've fused, I hate these terms, but the high and low brow, like smash them together. And so with Pomona, there's obviously quite a big Wojciech influence in there, and kind of other stuff. Othello, I remember reading again, because it's got that kind of knotty play and knotty plot, and they're all kind of spinning around each other. But then I was asking the director to watch lots of really early Disney cartoons, and like 1930s cartoons where it's just like black and white, like line drawings and stuff. The reason being was because if you watch like a really early Mickey Mouse cartoon, or even before Mickey Mouse, a character called Oswald, who was the kind of precursor to Mickey Mouse, he will, save Minnie and whistle and, romp around cheerfully, but he'll also like smoke a cigar and shoot a gun and kill people and things like that. And I liked that in those cartoons there was this constant kind of needle of kind of violence to comedy, and that they were just treated the same. So in the play, I named all the characters after kind of old comedians, so Buster Keaton and Laurel and Hardy and Marx Brothers and Three Stooges and people like that, as a way to kind of keep reminding myself normal rules don't really apply here. They're elastic. I can make something horrendous happen in the same scene as like a big joke and what have you, and that things in the play that might normally be treated as there's a lot of stuff about like bodily fluids and kind of grossness and things like that maybe would normally be talked about in kind of, I don't know, gritty, hard-hitting kind of ways, become kind of comic and then weirdly kind of transcendent at the end, I mean, I've completely gone off track what I was talking about, but it's all just, I guess it's fine because it is just an illustration of what I'm trying to say, is that because I'm just compulsive in reading and going to theatre and watching films and listening to music and just completely obsessive. If I hear about anything that I've not read or seen or heard, I will just immediately go and try and push it into my head. So what that means is that obviously when I write, my plays are just all over the place, and they're just a big mash of influences and interests and things like that. And I think that's possibly the only reason anyone's ever thought anything I've done is original, is because if you look at a lot of, I guess particularly contemporary plays, you can go, oh, I can see the 5 things that have weighed in heavily on this play, and I think possibly with mine there's maybe 8, 9 or 10, and they're from all over the place. The last play, I was getting everyone to watch all of Tarkovsky's stuff because of how he dealt with time, but I was also constantly talking about John Carpenter because he's kind of a master of point A to point B storytelling, of just, we've got 90 minutes and we've got to get from here to here, let's go, and there's no fat on it at all, and I don't really have an ending for that, but that's I guess that feels like my allotted time, so I'll stop.
Vendar pa pri Pomoni se nisi ustavljal pri nabiranju referenc, oziroma Pomona je v resnici komad, v katerem si lahko sprostil nezavedni tok vseh mogočih referenc. V enem zapisu, ki ga je pač Alistair objavil, mislim, da za Guardian, pravi, da Pomona nosi najočitnejši pečat dramatike Samuela Becketa, Carol Churchill, Edwarda Bonda, vplive podolguje Lovecraftu, potem bratu Marx, Busterju Keatonu, zgodnjih hollywoodskim mislem, kot je rekel, Davidu Fosterju Wellesu, Williamu Basinskemu, Flannery O'Connorju, Formasu McCountryju, film Polanskega, Cronenberga, Fellinija in tako naprej, še Laurie Anderson pride in Vihar in še mnogo drugega.
Chinatown.
Ja.
But I mean, when you read that list out, it sounds like all kinds of different things. Me hearing that list years after writing it, they're all people who've created a world that you can draw a circle around, and they've let things kind of happen, which is exactly what the play is. It's a very enclosed. It's not a real Manchester. It's not a real city. It's a new world for things to happen within. Whereas talk show, I was kind of obsessed with the American Civil War at the time. So there's bits in there about like Lincoln. And the two brothers in that are represented as one loves American fiction and the other loves Russian fiction. So one is kind of wild and messy and kind of and full of kind of passion and weirdness, and the other is kind of more about like a studied pursuit of some kind of pursuit of some kind of ideal. And these things, they're interesting to talk about and everything, but they're just sort of moss that you pick up as you're going down the hill of writing a play. And what really I'm spending 98% of my time thinking about when I'm writing a play is whose story is this and what do they want? And everything else just sort of follows along with that. And I think the difference with Pomona is that I wanted to write something that felt very modern and immediate, and it felt like how it feels to live in a city today. My analogy of that would be, if you walk down the street in a city, you'll hear, 5 to 6 different songs from shops. You'll hear 5 to 6 different conversations as people walk past you. Maybe you're listening on your headphones to your own stuff, and then that'll be kind of in your head. Maybe you'll get a text or you'll check Facebook. And I wanted the play to feel like that, like there's just constantly just stuff flying at you. So all I did with Pomona was just allow it to seep in a little bit. So I didn't edit it out as much. So one character does talk about Pomona briefly, I think. Pokemon, and Indiana Jones is in there, and like various like things just sort of pop in, not necessarily to do with the plot, but to help give kind of colour and shade to this fact of like, yeah, everyone is connected all the time now, you know. I'm sorry, I interrupted you anyway, but that's what I can say.
V resnici sem se želela navezati iz tega vprašanja vseh tega melišča najrazličnejših vplivov in seveda tudi Pomone kot ne samo realnega prostora v Manchesteru, ampak predvsem Pomone kot simbola. Jaša, kaj tebi predstavlja v resnici Pomona in simbol česa je v tvoji nekak režijski misli pri uprizoritvi?
Jaz sem obiskal Pomono, tako da sem celo prehodil po dnevi. Igralci so me kregali, da bi mogel po noč hoditi po njej. Kar bi sicer res lahko, ampak verjetno je res strašno, tam že po dnevi ni najlepše. Zelo blizu centra mesta je, se nisem šel pogledati zato, da vem, kakšna je Pomona, da bomo lahko mi igrali, ampak me je zanimalo, radovednost me je gnala, ker Pomona je resničen kraj. Alistair je več let bilo zanimivo, ker je sred centra mesta, med kanaloma, koz zemlje, nič ni na njem. Tako da sem ga prehodil levo, desno, bilo precej inspirativno, tako da mislim, da smo tudi mi vse dobili neko uporabno informacijo, kakšen je ta kraj, in teoretično bi res lahko bilo tam marsikaj pod zemljo tega otoka. Kot je Alistair prej omenil, Pomona je neko temno srce mesta, ne funkcionira samo kot resničen kraj, in mi smo se zelo vezali v celotnem konceptu. Če je ta predstava nekakšna centrifuga, je Pomona neko nevidno, občasno vidno, ampak nevidno, neka črna luknja, neko središče, črna luknja, ki cel svet poganja naokoli. Ampak ta svet je the shady side of the city, neka temna stran mesta, neke pozabljene ulice, neki ljudje, ki so zašli v jarek in se izkopavajo ven, kakor se znajo, ne gre jim najbolje. Čas jih tepe, usoda jih tepe, okoliščine jih tepe po glavi, ampak oni se fajtajo. In skozi njihov ta trud, v bistvu ta človeškost pride ven, se mi zdi. To, da se boš ti, ko ti bo šlo vse narobe, ko se boš probal stegnati za tistim enim kavlom, ki ga vidiš pred sabo, ki bo spolzek, pa te bo urezal po roki, pa ga ne boš mogel prijeti, ampak še vedno se boš stegval. In ta črna luknja je neusmiljena in se vrti, kakor čas teče, tudi za nas. In tudi na nek način, ko razmišljaš o teh ljudeh, ki so ujeti v Pomono, mi smo nekako ujeti v Pomono, mislim, da za večino nas vseeno je ta temnina prijaznejša, svetlejša tema. Ne? Tako da kaj mene je strah Pomone, no? Če govorimo o konceptu, če obstaja ta koncept, to temno srce mesta. Jaz, ko sem prvič bral tekst, ko sva se z Igorjem pogovarjala tudi še pred časom, ko sem se pogovarjala, kaj bi delali tu v mali drami, se še danes živo spomnim na občutka vznemirjenosti, tega, da sem bil pretresen pri enih stvareh, da prav nisem popolnoma razumel, sfasciniran in tesnova, ki sem jo že omenil. In nekaj, kar me požene, kot v smislu ustvarjanja, ja, kaj je to, kaj je ta svet? Pomona je skrivnost, ki si jo želiš odkriti. To je tako, kot si na nek filmski prizor, ne? Je oseba v grozni situaciji, pa nekaj nevarnega, pa bo vedno šel pogledat, vedno bo odprl okno, vedno bo šel za zvokom, vedno bo naredil stvar, ki je ne sme, in potem se zgodba odvija naprej.
Mogoče iz točno tega konteksta, v bistvu, kaj Pomona kot simbol in kot idejno za nas pomeni, bi na Alistairja, v bistvu za Alistairja postavila eno vprašanje, ki se dotika krstne uprizoritve Pomone, ki je bila v bistvu v sodelovanju z Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama ter Royal Courtom. Zgodil se je fenomenalen v bistvu začetek te predstave z izjemnim obiskom, izjemnimi kritikami, predvsem pa s popolnoma novo strukturo gledalcev. V teater so namreč prišli ljudje, ki niso dotedaj redno obiskovali gledališča. Me zanima, čemu pripisuje oziroma na kakšen način si razlagaš Alistair to?
I don't know, so its premiere was a theatre called the Orange Tree Theatre in London. It had a kind of a workshopy thing at Royal Welsh, that's okay. But I don't know. I've been pretty open about it. I have no idea why it was popular. I think it's a decent piece of writing. Like, I'm proud of it, and I thought the production was great. I thought they did a really brilliant job on it, and I was happy with it. But I don't know why it became so popular. I mean, I think probably part of the reason was the surprise of it, in that it is quite odd, and it does, maybe just because of the world it creates and the types of characters that are in there, it maybe felt a bit different than what was around at the moment. But I don't think it's hugely original. I can only say that when I'm writing a play, I'm just writing for me. If I'm trying to guess what an audience is and write for them, it'll be disastrous. You can't second guess who an audience is made up of. It'll always be much more interesting and weird and wonderful than you can imagine, because people are. So I just write as if I'm the audience, because if I enjoy it, I know I'll at least finish the play, because I want to get to the end of it, which is the main thing. But so I can only say that maybe there are a lot of people who were scared of the same things I was scared of. I mean, the play seems to be about a particularly modern, a lot of the plays about like consumption, and there's a long speech at the beginning which sort of posits this idea of if you start if I start looking into where my shoes or my jeans were made, or where what I had for dinner came from, or that because of how globalized everything is and how we all want everything now all the time, that there are processes that we've sort of kind of given the thumbs up to without actually doing that. And I started to feel like maybe is it possible to be a good person anymore? You can walk around and think, oh, I'm nice to people and I try and buy this type of stuff and I don't buy that, but chances are like you've got something in your cupboard somewhere that's been tested on animals or was bottled by someone getting paid less than a penny an hour, or like this idea that underneath everything how we live is just this kind of thick vein of kind of darkness and unpleasantness and stuff, and when I was writing it I wasn't in a great place and had a family bereavement and stuff, so it's kind of generally down, so it just made the shadows a lot darker in the play, I think. But no, I've always been kind of I wouldn't go as far as to say mystified, but it was a surprise to me that it lasted. I mean, it ran for a long time in England, and it gets quite a few productions now, and I'm always slightly surprised because it's not very nice. It's not a very nice play. It's got lots of horrible stuff in it. I think it's got some quite good jokes in it, maybe, but I think broadly it's quite a dark world. So. Whereas, I mean, the other one that I've done that is kind of Brilliant Adventures is the other one that gets done quite a lot as well, and that has got some nasty stuff in it, but that's a lot lighter. It's more of a kind of, I'd say it's easier to call a comedy. The characters are all quite likeable, and whereas I don't know. So no, it was a very pleasant surprise to me. But no, I when it was gonna. I think the week we were about to put it, I thought it was going to be a disaster. I thought it was going to be hated by everyone. I really thought it was going to get slated, and I thought I would never work again. Which sounds like typical writer self-pity, but I haven't felt that badly about other plays that haven't done as well. Or, So, no, it is a surprise to me. I don't know. I think partly it moves quite fast, which helps. So you don't have a huge amount of time to get bored. And, I think it's fast, hopefully funny, and it's got... I mean, the other thing, I guess, is maybe tied into... I teach writing sometimes, and I always try and say that a good ending should be a bridge from inside the theatre to outside. And that doesn't necessarily mean it should be a speech about the outside world. I mean, a good ending shouldn't just be a full stop. It should be, a semicolon. It should be something that is the ending, but there could be. And more and more, as I keep writing plays, I'm less and less and less interested in explaining everything, making everything clear, making anything less than ambiguous. I'm interested in leaving as many avenues for an audience to bring themselves into the play as possible, and I think this play has a lot of space for the audience. I mean, there's a lot of different theories about what it's about and who goes where, and that was the most fun about doing it. And X, the one after, had a similar thing, that people had come up to me and explained their theory about what it all meant and who was doing what and blah blah blah. And I like that, and I have a pretty clear... Well, I have the answer. I have the concrete answer. This is what is happening. But it's not really valid, and it doesn't matter, because as soon as I've written it, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It's who's ever's. So I never tell anyone they're right or wrong about any of it. I try and, unless it's really stupid, but like I try and broadly allow as much. And maybe that's it. Is that it gave you a reason to stay in a bar afterwards and talk about it, and it gave you a reason to come back and see it again, maybe.
Mogoče bi bilo lahko naslednje vprašanje, ki bi ga zastavila osredotočeno na bolj življenje dramatika oziroma njegovo življenje pač po tem, ko je napisal Brilliant Adventures, ko je dobil Brandworth Award, ko je v bistvu pač začel svojo na nek način javno profesionalno kariero, ampak mogoče bi na tem mestu predtem še vzpostavila možnost, da če bi se karkoli nagovorilo oziroma če imate kakšno vprašanje da za publiko, mislim iz publike, da vprašate bodisi Alistairja ali pa Jašo, če je že kaj, če ne pa pač prihranite do konca, ne? Skratka, vprašanje ostaja, kakšno je tvoje življenje od te velike spremembe, v bistvu, ko je Brilliant Adventures dobila nagrado in kako se nekako spreminja tudi tvoje pisanje.
So I started writing plays when I was 16 and I just did it repeatedly for a long time, and then I was starting to make a bit of money. I got money from theatres to do placements, and I was doing little bits and bobs. I wasn't making quite enough to not have another job, and then I lost my job. I worked at an art gallery, telling people not to touch things. I did that for 3 years, and then I lost that job, and then the day after I won the prize, so it was like very, very good timing. But I didn't like it at first being full-time. It's the thing that you want for ages, and then when I got it, I didn't like it because I come from a kind of, I guess, an upper working class background, and my wife was a teacher at the time, so she was going out and working all day, and I was just sitting at home, and I just felt guilty. I didn't feel like I was contributing anything. And also the big thing that changes is, before it was my job, if I didn't want to write a play, I just wouldn't write a play. But then I kind of had to write a play because someone was waiting for a play. So it was hard to shift my thinking into ways to not get trapped in that. And it took me probably about 6 months to kind of get used to that, I think. It's a big life shift. Because you go from someone else telling you you've got to be here at this time and then you can leave at this time, to just nothing. Like, no one was telling me anything. I could just get up whenever, I could do nothing all day and then go. And I wasn't doing that, but what I was doing was getting up, sitting at my desk, even if I didn't have an idea, and just sitting there just feeling depressed, and then that would be my day. So it took me a while to get used to the idea of like, well, I'm a writer, my job, like reading is kind of my main job almost. I can go to a gallery, I can go for a walk. All of these things are important and stuff. So it took me a while to get used to that. And I mean, what's my life like now? I get to travel around a lot and stuff because people have put on the plays, which is nice. And I teach sometimes if I want to, if I think like I need to kind of top up, and I think I can be of use. But it's lovely. I mean, what's hard is that I have a lot of anxiety, and I have kind of worries and kind of obsessive disorders and things like that. So the worst job in the world for me to do would be to sit around all day and think about imaginary people's emotional problems, you know, which is what I do now every day. So that took a while to get used to as well. But I don't know. I don't subscribe to the romance of writing. I think it's a craft. I think it feels romantic because ideas hopefully just kind of appear and you're like, oh my god, that's a thing, and then that feels kind of romantic and exciting. But I think if you break down why that happens, it's I always think it's probably more like a belch, in that if you eat a lot of food, eventually it'll mix around and you'll burp. So if you read a lot of books and go a lot of places and talk to lots of people and live your life and listen to music and look at art and go to theatre and whatever, eventually your brain's going to go, oh, what if this? And you'll go, oh yeah, wow, that's come from nowhere. And it hasn't really. It's just a mishmash of all kinds of things. And when I look at the plays, I can see where like X, the play that I did set on Pluto, which is all about people yearning to get home and we can't get home, we're trapped, and where is home, and we're stuck. I thought was this, you know, I was like, wow, what an original theatrical experience. And then I realised that my mum had sold the house that our family kind of grew up in just before I started writing it. So the whole play was just my subconscious working through that, basically, which is kind of disappointing because you realise, yeah, everything's just a bunch of chemicals swishing around inside you, you know. But so I don't subscribe to that. I think it is a lot of reading and a lot of thinking and a lot of feeling quite depressed that nothing's happening, and then suddenly things are happening, and at the moment I'm in a stage where things are starting to happen but not quite as well as I would like them to. So what does my day look like? I get up, I try and go to a library, I sit, if I'm writing I'll write for like a burst, like an hour and a half, and then maybe I'll read for a bit and do notes. I like to draw cartoons of the characters and stuff sometimes, that helps me, and I'll cut things out and make kind of scrapbooky type stuff, and that's it really. I mean, it's collating information and then sorting it and then writing it, and that takes either a month or lots of months depending on what the play is. But I'm very I don't like, if I teach and if I'm teaching like a young writer and they're talking about their day job with a kind of like a sneer, like, oh, I'm trapped in this hellish coffee shop job or whatever, I really try and give them a bit of a bollocking, because I just think it's all just life, and I'm still probably drawing on my day jobs for material more than any of the kind of you know, because there's something kind of real and human about that. You know, the last play had like 2 characters named after people I used to work with, and I hadn't been in that job for like 6 years or something, you know, maybe a bit longer. So I don't know, like I get asked that a lot, particularly by young writers, because they think it's going to be this amazing thing when it happens, and it's hard not to sound, because I realise I'm now sounding ungrateful and you know, and cocky and blah, but the reality is that it's only fun if you really work hard, and the hard part of getting yourself to work hard is realising that it's your job, it's not just something you do for fun anymore, you know, and trying to keep it fun, I think is that's the hardest thing about it, I think. I would never tell anyone who was employing me this, but if I'm going to do a job, I'm going to write a play or a piece or a script or whatever, I try and think, would I do this for free? And if I would, then it's probably a good idea to do it. And if I wouldn't, then I probably shouldn't do it, no matter how much they're paying me, because it's just going to be an awful slog, I think. I mean, writing a play you don't want to write is worse than working any shitty job, I think. At least, like, mentally. I don't think I'm not explaining that physically or socially, or if you've got kids or whatever. But for me, as a young-ish person, I'd rather go and kind of do a bit of part-time work again, then write something I don't want to write, because that just means sitting at a table all day and feeling miserable all day, you know. So yeah.
Ja, njegov kolega, dramatik britanski Simon Stevens, omenja v predgovorih tem igram, da je pisanje iger za Alistairja resna stvar. In pred kratkim pač je dobil, oziroma danes mi je povedal, precej ponudb od vodilnih londonskih gledališč, ne? In med ostalim od National Theatre, od Almeide, mislim, da od Royal Courta. In me zanima, mislim, kako se soočati s tem, glede na to, da pač je vse 3 ponudbe zaenkrat zavrnil. Kaj v bistvu je potem nekako, kako lahko v bistvu balansiramo pač s tem pritiski?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is hard. I felt a little bit of pressure the first time when I got my commission from the Royal Court, because it was the Royal Court, and because I'd done talk show there, and I didn't want to do the same thing again. and it's Vicky Featherstone who runs it now, who's kind of an amazing person and really makes you want to do your best work for her. So I think I wrote a whole play that I didn't like, sort of binned, and wrote half of, like, it took me a long time to find what the right thing is. And I think with the Royal Court there is an unspoken thing of you do the play there that you maybe couldn't do elsewhere, so you do something that is, you don't necessarily churn in your next play, you turn in like your next step, hopefully, you know. So I did find that a bit of pressure. The point at which I stopped feeling that pressure was just, I eventually just stopped caring about it, which meant that when I realised that the play I was going to write was set on Pluto, it seemed such a ridiculous, stupid idea that I just thought, well, yeah, okay, it's funny. It'll be funny to hand in this play set on Pluto. And I also just thought, oops, sorry, I'm vibrating. I also just thought, I thought maybe wouldn't do it. Which I guess is a slightly roundabout way of saying that I stopped writing for someone else and started just writing for me, which is what you have to do anyway. The point I realise I'm doing something crap is because I'm trying to impress a building or a person or whatever, and I just have to do what I want to see next. Like, what do I want to see? But the most, I feel more pressure from myself, really, because I don't just want to keep doing them and they're just all the same, and I get very bored, so the plays tend to be quite different, the next one to the next one, because I'm kind of done with that now, so I'll do something else, you know. Like, in between, not in between, but around the same time as Pomona, I wrote a big play that actually hadn't been done yet, which was like a 17th century murder mystery all about like religion and misogyny, and it was like a big play with a big cast, and it was a bit like, my friend called it A Midsummer Night's Crucible, is what he called it, which I thought was quite funny. So it was obvious that the play after that was we're going up into space in some kind of unspecified future. So I think that's the thing for me, is to try and keep finding ways to keep me interested, because I'm very impatient and I get bored quite often, which sounds childish, but I think it's possibly quite a good quality to have if you're writing theatre, because theatre often is very boring. So if I'm constantly worried about boring even myself, then hopefully that means that whatever I'm writing, if it's going to keep my childish impatient self occupied, then maybe more mature people, by which I mean everyone, will probably be able to lock into it too. But no, I feel more pressure from myself, because I don't want to. I think that's also a slight guilt thing of, if I'm asking someone to come watch a play that I've written, it's like I'm asking a theatre to get behind it and put loads of money into it, and there's a cast, and there's a crew, and it's going to, people have got to do it every single night, and it's got to be fun for everyone every single night, and I'm asking all these people to come, I'm asking people to get a babysitter, I'm asking people to get there, get transport, maybe it's far away, tickets are expensive, have they got a crap seat, all of these things. I'm asking them to do all of this stuff in the hope that maybe it's going to be great. So I really think about that all the time. It's kind of a constant thing I'm worried about, because, I mean, the amount of times I'm sure everyone goes to see a show, and then within about 12 seconds of a lights going down, you're like, oh, I should have stayed in. Like, immediately, like, should have stayed in. And I just feel like I'm constantly trying to be like, even if you don't like the play, you should at least have a sense of, oh, I needed to be here for this. They couldn't just film it and send me the tape. They couldn't describe it. They couldn't take pictures of it. It's this thing in this room. So that's the pressure that I feel on myself, is to try and find different ways every time of making being in the same room as the action different and exciting and new and hopefully explosive.
Prej si omenil, da je recimo vsaka naslednja uprizoritev igre v Royal Courtu korak naprej za dramatika. Mene pa zdaj zanima tudi, če recimo angažma drugih večjih britanskih gledališč, ki gojijo seveda tradicijo vzgoje mladih dramatikov, tutorstva, delavnic, razvoja besedil prek workshopov. In ta tradicija seveda je zelo dragocena in ima seveda določene posledice, veliko mladih, vznemirljivih, novih pisav, ne? In me sem zanima tako, recimo pač en tak mogoče pregled ali pa en kratek pogled v tvojo izkušnjo.
I'm not maybe the best person to talk about that, because I know a lot of people think very carefully about what the theatre is that they're writing for, and I try not to think about that at all. I know that completely contradicts what I just said about the Royal Court, but the point at which I started being able to write that play was when I forgot all of that and stopped thinking about it. And I just write what I want to write, and I just trust the theatre to make the choice as to whether this is the right show for them or not. I mean, what I do is think very, very carefully about what the space is. So, am I in the rounds, or am I kind of prosage, a big room, a small room, where's the audience, you know? And if I'm writing, for instance, a bedroom, I'm not writing a bedroom, I'm writing a bedroom on a stage in a certain size of theatre and shape, what have you. So I think very, very carefully about the architecture of the space, because I think that's completely tied into how it's experienced. So for X, I wanted it to be in a big room, even though it's a one-room location. I wanted it to be a big room because I felt like you had to have actual space above your head. You had to have quite a high ceiling. For some reason, I thought that's going to help people accept that this is a story set there. And I wanted it to be in a prosage. I wanted the audience to be able to sort of hold it in a frame away from them so that they could consider it. I wasn't trying to trick people into thinking we'd gone into space. That would be kind of pointless and not really the point of the play. It was about considering what happens when you put people in a box. So if you have a prosage, you're literally putting people in a box, you know. Workshops and stuff, I mean, it depends what the play is. Pomona had like a tryout with the Royal Welsh College, like you said, and that was useful for that play because I rewrote it quite a bit after that. That's unusual for me though, and I think the reason why it needed it was because I'd written that play quite quickly and quite an emotional frame of mind. It was just a complete mess, really. Like, it wasn't a complete mess, but it was messier than it is now. But mostly I'm pretty old-fashioned in that I like to work out what I'm doing, go away and not tell anyone what I'm doing. I mean, I don't tell anyone what I'm working on ever, because if I do, I won't finish it, which is my superstition and things like that. But you know, like when you're a kid and you try to draw you draw like a cat, and someone goes, "Oh, you're drawing a cat." You're like, "Oh, I don't want her anymore. Like, I don't want to draw." Just you looking at it and saying it's a cat. It's got, you know, and it's the same. I still have that in my head, because if I say to someone, "Oh, I'm writing this," like with Pomona, I think for a long time I was thinking I'm writing a play about the M60 ring road. So if I said which is a motorway, so if I said to someone, say, "What are you working on?" I say, "Oh, I'm sort of writing a play about a motorway." I know that their expression would just be like, "Oh," and then that would make me go, "Well, I'm not going to write it anymore. Forget about it." Even though I know that's not the whole play, it's broken to me, and I think that's because the act of writing anything is the act of creating a story that you then get to tell in its complete form. So if I do that early on, if I tell someone it's like when you meet someone at a party and they're trying to tell you about their book they're writing, they're never going to write that book, ever, because they've done the thing. If they wanted to write it, they'd work on it and then do it. But if they've told you it, it's like taking a loaf of bread out of the oven too early. So I don't tell anyone what I'm working on. I don't generally do readings. I don't generally do workshops. That's because I personally don't find them very useful, or at least for the play so far. Never say never. One I've got coming up in the future I think might need a bit of that, because it's going to be quite big, I think. So it might need just for me to see it, you know. But I like to just write it, turn up with it. My first draft's never my first draft. People read my first and a half draft usually, because I work over it and over it and over it before I hand it in to anyone. And then I get notes and I go away and I work on it. I like to do I don't know, 4 drafts, around that 4 or 5, maybe a few more, a few less. I don't like to do lots and lots of quick ones. I like to do a few slow ones. But then this is also because I'm basing this on the last play I wrote, which was quite a dense, complicated text, so that's the only way it could have been written. So this could all change like immediately. But it's becoming more common in England, I think, that there definitely are like more workshops and more readings and things like that. But I think theatres still broadly trust writers if they've kind of proven it with a play or two beforehand. I mean, you hear stories in America, writers just only doing readings like they've never been produced or something, which seems, that's not why I got into theatre really, you know. So I don't know. I always feel slightly out of place because I think I am quite old-fashioned. I like to go away, do it, go, there you go, give me my notes, I'll go off, I'll do a bit more. And I'm not really about, let's just get it in a room and tear it up, throw it around a bit. And I think that's because I'm working with story a lot of the time, and it's quite hard to, I've really worked on story a lot before anyone sees the thing. So you can't really then take a bit out and look at it and blog it back in or whatever. The play is broadly what it's going to be in the early stage, and that redrafts of me are just about cutting out kind of the chaff and, you know, tightening it and making it clearer and more direct and more, you know. I tend to in drafts cut rather than add stuff. So,
Jaša, sedimo na odru, na scenografiji Pomone. Mene samo zanima tako, da povežemo recimo avtorjevo vizijo, ki je bila zasnovana za okroglo prizorišče, ne? S to vizijo, ki jo zdaj vidimo, ki je pač narejena za našo malo dramo, ne? Kako recimo pač je bilo zate od tega, ko si prebral igro in zaslutil vso to krožnost, ne? Ki usmerja dogajanje, ki je strukturirana okrog teh 7 usod, likov in večnega iskanja izgubljene sestre v resnici, ne? Oziroma iskanja, ki se na nek način nikoli ne konča, do tega, da smo prišli do te postavitve, oziroma kaj je bila neka ključna premisa in odločitev, da je to recimo možno, oziroma celo lahko zelo vznemirljivo uprizarjati pač ravno v to vrstnem prostoru, kot je ta tukaj.
Zelo ne rad bi v scenografiji preveč razlagal, ker upam, da bo delovala v možgančkih gledalcev. Bi pa rekel za malo dramo, zakaj je Pomona v mali drami, te rešetke gor na stropu. To je nek ključ, prek katerih smo prišli do scenografske rešitve. Za neki ful več res ne bi. Mislim, zelo blizu mi je Alistairjev odnos do tega, kaj je pika v pomenih, v tem, kar piše. Tudi, ko sva se dobila teh 5 vprašanj, ki sem vam jih omenil, niso dobili odgovora, ne? Tako ali tako. Ampak mi je rekel, da ne ve. In to sem čutil že prej in mi je bilo super, ker mi je to potrdil. Nekaj zaradi česar pa res 2 meseca zdajle bil v nekem zelo napornem potovanju, imam čutek res, da sem bil v njegovi glavi noter, je pa točno to, kar je prej malo razlagal, ne? Da on, ko prvič prebereš Pomono, se ti zdi, aha, pa sej, to se ljudje pogovarjajo, to bi lahko bilo tudi malo drugače, pa se zgodi to, pa ono. No in potem se ukvarjaš nekaj časa s tem in ti ugotoviš, da je to kirurško natančno napisan tekst. Da je vrstni red prizorov točno tak, kakor more biti. Da je to res ti 4 končni drafti. In to je na nek način lahko tudi frustrirajoče, ampak ne, kar pa rešuje, kar je zame kot režiserja čutim veliko darilo, da je starting point za Alistairja, za dramatika, nek ta osnovni gradnik ambiguity, ne? Ta neka, kaj je to, dvoumnost. Neka dvoumnost, ne? Ki jo mora biti ravno dovolj, da začne domišljija plesati, pa ravno dovolj logike mora biti, da lahko ti na koncu sestavljanko sestaviš. In to mi je to mi je res pri Pomoni, tudi pri njegovem drugem pisanju, pri Pomoni še najbolj, ne, ker sem tudi jo najbolj zljubil, logično. To mi je pa super. Ok, ja, čuti se, da je to za round theater, da je to za okroglo prizorišče. Orange Tree je v krogu, ne, v Royal Exchange v Manchesteru so ga uprizarjali tudi okroglo prizorišče, v Nationalu so ga tudi naredili v okroglem. Tudi deskalje pravijo, pač igralci pridejo na oder in potem izstopajo skozi na sceni. Zdaj v mali drami je prostor specifičen, zelo nizek, vizure so specifične, vhodov je zelo malo. In zdaj kako to kroženje ustvarjati, kako to pulziranje ustvarjati, to so se z scenografom Darjanom Mihajlovićem Cerarjem sva se kar prebijala še pred študijem seveda in med študijem. Prišla do neke rešitve, za katero upava, da bo funkcionirala. Najina inspiracija pa so torej rešetke v mali drami.
Imamo kakšno vprašanje iz publike oziroma ima kdo karkoli, kar bi rad delil, povedal, vprašal?
Jaz bi mogoče tam še čisto nazaj, ki se prvič vprašala, zakaj se mi zdi, da je ta igra imela tak uspeh. Mislim, seveda namreč bilo vse superlativno narejeno, ampak v bistvu mi strašno radi gledamo grozljivke. Ali pa iščemo po Facebooku ali pa ne vem, kjerkoli, iščemo neke stvari, ki nas strašijo. Ne. Tudi, če greš po cesti, pa se zgodi nesreča, namesto da bi kričil pa letiš stran, buliš v nekoga. Ne. Skratka, to je nekaj, kar imamo kot neko vznemirjenje. In ta Pomona je tak velik vprašaj, kaj to je. In če piše od spodaj thriller ali pa grozljivka, je to že samo po sebi, se mi zdi, da zelo zanimivo. Mene pa tukaj zanima, prej je bila omenjena igrica, ta Dungeons & Dragons, ne? Jaz, ko sem bral to igro, ne, recimo drugič, tretjič, nisem več vedel, a v bistvu sodelujem v igrici. To se mi zdi recimo ta držljivost še po neki drugi strani. A je to sploh prava zgodba ali je to nek popoln fiction skozi neko igrico? Pa me zanima tukaj, koliko je ta igrica, ki vemo, da je igra na ključi in tega, koliko je bila ta igra tudi inspirativna oziroma kakšne posledice posledice?
Yeah, the play's got Dungeons and Dragons in it. The characters play Dungeons and Dragons, which then kind of twists in with the plot. I'd been interested in Dungeons and Dragons for a while. I never played it, but friends of mine had, and I played kind of similar stuff. But the reason why I was interested in it was because Dungeons and Dragons is basically theatre. It's the same mechanic. It's a group of people coming together and imagining a story together and experiencing it in the moment together. And I thought it was interesting to kind of put that within a play. You get this kind of Russian doll thing, where it's a play within a play, you know. And also, I liked the idea of, in Dungeons and Dragons, you try and perform an action, then you have to roll dice to see how successful you were at that action or not. And I thought that was an interesting mechanic to use in a story about characters who don't seem to have any choice about the path that they're on, and they seem to be just locked into like a loop that they're just kind of spinning around and having to hurt each other and be hurt and things like this. And so I was interested for a while. I mean, it's in quite a lot of plays, Dungeons and Dragons, but it's usually used as a shorthand for this character's a nerd, therefore he likes Dungeons and Dragons, so let's just have him talk about it for a little bit, and that tells us who it is. So it's used as a kind of character signifier rather than something else. Dennis Kelly uses it quite well enough to the end. It has a kind of it becomes about like choice and things like this. Whereas in this play, a lot of the play is about what's real, what's not, what choice do you have, what are things that are just circumstance that you can't escape, what are things that you have an option as to whether you do or not, and characters' capacity to harm each other, or buy each other or things like that, and all of these things seem to kind of net into Dungeons and Dragons. So I guess the answer is initially I was interested in using it as a piece of kind of theatrical form, and then once I kind of decided that's what we're going to do, I realised that it kind of meshed in with everything else in the play as well. Because I mean, in a play, really every element has to be working towards the same kind of goal, and the boring answer to why is anything in any play ever is just because it's all part of the same engine. If you take it out, it won't run anymore. So kind of that's why that's there. I also always like the idea of one character explaining the rules of a game to another, which is a big scene in the play, because it sets all kinds of kind of power dynamics at play, and it mirrors a lot of scenes in a play where one character is explaining a series of rules to another, which become kind of more and more and more serious kind of incidents, you know. So it was a way to kind of mirror and kind of contextualize things that happen within the play, and then as the play goes along, it shifts, and you're not sure what's the game and what's not the game anymore, and it becomes like another level of kind of the chaos that's going on in the play, which wasn't super clear. But I mean, the main thing is that I was interested in it because it was theatre, and I thought it would be exciting to put a kind of a different form of theatre within a theatre.
Še kakšno vprašanje iz publike?
Ja, mene bi zanimala, če ste kaj seznanjeni, kakšna pa drugač zgodovina tega otoka. A je to zgodovina na način, vemo, da je zapor, Alcatraz zapor je na otoku, a je to otok kot Bled, kakor ga imamo Slovenci, ali je to otok kot Cipr, ki je razdeljen na pol, ali je to mogoče kot konec koncev kot Lido, kot Benetke, ali se samo premom tam odgovarjali ladje, ne vem,
It's nothing quite as glamorous as any as that, I don't think. It was at one point, I think very early on, it was a pleasure garden. So it was a bit like Crystal Palace in London or something. It was a place, I think 19th century. I'm not as up on this as I should be. I was closer to the time, but I think at some point in the 19th century it was a place where people from Manchester would go, and there was like gardens and things. It was also a dock for a while, so it was important for shipping and things like that. It's a place where lots of kind of cabling, like telephone cabling and things like that, runs underneath. And that's broadly about it, I think. I mean, I think a lot of people looked into the history of the island and thought there was going to be all kinds of secrets hidden in play about it, but there's not really. Similarly, I was unaware until quite late in writing that the Pomona is the Roman goddess of plenty. Which weirdly works with the play, so it was kind of lucky, really. But it's not. There are a lot of secrets in the play, but they're not to do with the place necessarily. I mean, the thing that was interesting about Pomona is it's just been nothing for ages, which in a city is quite. It's not rare for a building, because obviously building space in cities is so expensive that often offices are empty for a long time, but it's an actual plot of land. Now they're building flats on it, so it's just going to look like anywhere else, you know, which I kind of don't mind that it's going to be geographically out of date pretty soon, the play, because the play really was for me about kind of 2001 to maybe 2012, like 2011, like that 10 years, that kind of decade, I think, like the decade basically that was just finishing as I finished writing it, I guess. And I had something else to say and it's completely gone, I've forgotten it. When it was on in London, most people didn't even know it was a real place. I think most people still don't quite know it's a real place because of the way it's introduced at the beginning of the play. It's described in quite mysterious terms, and it sounds like kind of treasure map directions or something. There's this place, you must go there, blah, 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 there's these things. And it goes underground. One thing I will say that is geographically, I guess, kind of specific to the area is underneath Manchester there's a lot of big air raid shelters from the war, like huge ones where the whole city in theory would go down and be, and you can go on a tour in Manchester at certain times, and huge kind of caves that you can go into. And Pomona has space underneath it for cables and sewage and things. So what I did was I just sort of joined the two, because it's not a spoiler to say that it's underground Pomona where things happen, where we go towards the end of the play. So.
When you mentioned Pomona was a garden, Poma in Latin means fruit.
Yeah.
And Pomona she was a goddess or something of also fertility.
Yeah, the Roman goddess of plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she had a basil or something near the main square in Rome.
Yeah.
That's why it was interesting when you said that there used to be gardens.
Yeah. Well, I presume that's why it was named that. I mean, but again, the thing is that the play is not really about Pomona. It's not about Manchester. It's just about cities. It's about consumption. It's about kind of 21st century fears. These are just locations. The reason that it was a great location for the story is because it was an island, because it was right in the middle, because it was surrounded, because Manchester's canals and brick, and Manchester is a city that's been redeveloped a lot very quickly recently, so it's got very old buildings right up against very new buildings, like glass and steel next to brick railway arches. And Manchester's geography is lots of little back streets and things, and it was a city where you feel like you can hide easily, you know. Whereas London, despite the fact it's huge, the centre of it feels relatively, there's quite a lot of big open spaces and stuff, you know. So I just used it almost as a landscape, both physical and emotional, rather than like the actual history of the place.
Je pa ena anekdota. I will add the anecdote about the tram.
Yeah.
Ena zanimivost iz resničnega življenja, ki se lahko preslika tudi do predstavo. Tramvaj postaje zdaj nekaj let na Pomoni in to je tudi v bistvu Alistairjeva anekdota, ki sem jaz potem tudi doživel, je the best. Pač tam res ni stavb in nikoli nihče ne gre dol, nihče ne gre gor. Tramvaj se pa vedno ustavi tam, ne? Tako da tramvaj se ustavi, Pomona. Vsi so primer, ljudje, in potem gre naprej. In ena izmed uvodnih idej, ne, če bi imeli budget, bi bilo zadnji malo drame, so vlak vsake toliko bi se pripeljal. Oder pa bi bil platforma, kjer ti nesrečni ljudje edini izstopijo, medtem ko se svet vozi naprej.
Jaz mislim, da to zelo dobro napotuje na mogoče že današnji ogled generalke, ki je nekoliko odprta, tako da ali pa jutrišnje premiere oziroma katerekoli ponovitve. Živijo Nik Škrlec, vprašanje še zadnje.
So I'm taking this question from the previous talk, and I think it's a question Charlie would ask, so it's I just gave myself the green light. So when you say you played similar games, which games?
Which games? I don't know. That's basically you saying how few dates did you have when you were a teenager, isn't it? I played, when I was, what are the various girl repellents that I played as a teenager? I played Warhammer with little models and stuff. I did a bit of that. Board games are quite big now, which is maybe another reason why the play keeps coming back, is that board games, I think because we hit sort of peak internet and everyone was just living on the internet, and then people were like, oh, it's quite fun to sit around a table with each other and play games. So the sales of board games have been like huge. There's been like loads of new ones and stuff. Like people are actually, it's quite common now. It's not necessarily but I think just about every sad activity you can imagine a teenager did, I probably did. I did comics, I did Warhammer, I did video games, but then my life doesn't feel particularly different now because I've done very little with myself other than sit inside and think up stories. That's all I've done with myself. That's all I've done. The only reason I write is because I'm addicted to fiction. So I think of a story and I'm like, oh, that'd be good. And it's like, oh, I didn't know, I better write it then, you know. That's sort of the annoying bit. It'd be better if it just did exist and I could just read it or watch it or whatever and then I wouldn't have to bother, you know. yeah, I don't really have anything else massively exciting to say about that. But like I think it's interesting how board games have sort of come back, because I think that's not just a kooky little thing that's happened. I think it's a little flagpole to say, people are missing looking at each other in the face, and because you can't be on your phone or whatever when you're doing them, you've got to be involved, and I think that's a big part of what the play's about. Is it seems to be people who are really, really lonely, even if they're with each other, and they don't know why they're lonely, and they don't know how to fix themselves being lonely. You know, it's a sad note to end on.
Če ni nadaljnih vprašanj, se zelo zahvaljujem vsem, da ste prišli. Thank you, Alistair, for everything what you said, for your visit, and
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
hope you will enjoy today's rehearsal.
Well, I hope the play goes well. I'd hate to be the guy that closed the theatre. Yeah, that'd be terrible.